Good evening and welcome to Straight Talk with me, Sifiso Mahlangu. Tonight I bring you the Minister of Environmental Affairs, Ms. Edna Molewa. We are well on our way to 2019 and controversy is amidst us. We are a month away from the ANC policy conference. COSATU, SACP, are they still even one with the ANC? We find out tonight here on Straight Talk. Minister, I welcome you to the show.
Thank you very much, Sifiso, and thanks for having me here at AM7.
The last time we spoke, it was just after the State of the Nation address, but thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. It was a great one indeed.
You wrote a piece, and if I may read, it is regrettable with the political power struggles being played out in public that truth has become the first casualty as some seek to relegate the past 8 years of the Zuma administration to the rubbish bin of history. Minister, what caused you to write this opinion piece?
Thank you very much for asking that question. Indeed, for also getting me here to clarify exactly what I said, because that's what I think the nation must discuss. And that is really about that we have actually begun compromising the truth and sacrificing the truth. As I say, it has become a casualty. Why do I say that? Is because indeed, if you listen to the noises and voices, because they are two different things, noises and voices on the ground in South Africa, you'd actually think that there's nothing that has ever been done under the leadership of President Jacob Zuma. And here I'm emphasizing under the leadership of President Jacob Zuma because indeed it is necessary for us as South Africans to always remember the collectivism that the president functions under. That's why in the piece I also talk about the Zuma administration. Because President Zuma has never been alone, but the noises out there are saying President Zuma did this, President Zuma did this, President Zuma. It's all about complaints and complaints. So the piece tries to lift things out that the nation should be talking about. Because when the president took oath, he took oath to the allegiance of the country, to serve the people of the country, to deliver the services that I'm talking about, some of which I'm referring to here. And people do not hear about those things. They are not being reported. Instead, you hear just one thing that is about removal, that is about corruption, that is... Of course, we've got to deal with corruption, but it mustn't blur the issues, the real good things that the president did in his administration.
Now, Minister, you've seen administrations change. The Mandela administration, the Mbeki administration, and now the Zuma administration. What do you think has caused that there are revolts in society, or people think that President Zuma is inadequate to lead the country? You speak of the voices and noises. What do you think has caused that there's so much noise in society today?
Let me start by saying that, by the way, what this society forgets is that President Zuma actually took, and I'm starting there, because I really want to talk about issues that are good. President Zuma took over this administration 8 years ago, just 10 months after the collapse of the Lehman Brothers. And a Great Depression followed indeed, not only in South Africa, but worldwide. The markets were down, prices were down on houses, property, and everywhere, and everything, including manufacturing capacity actually of the world came down. So the seriousness of the depression at the time, the recession in particular, was really just nothing small. And the fact that at the time, President Zuma stood up within his administration and said, we want to really make sure that as South Africa, we sustain our economy, we make it really become very resilient. And he announced 10 priority projects. Amongst those were infrastructure projects. And I'm talking about things that actually happened in a true sense of a word. These were differences. The difference between, and I'm talking about the differences between this administration and the previous, during that time, he actually, amongst the 10 priority projects, announced for the first time a new plan was worked on, which is the National Development Plan, which a nation rallies around. He at the same time established a very good department, which is called Department of Monitoring, Planning, Monitoring, and Evaluation. What is that? Because everybody in South Africa used to say, in the previous administration, we just work. We don't actually get measured. We don't see what's happening. Now, the measurement was there with very clear targets of each one of us who must do. Ministers became being, evaluated and monitored, whereas previously we were just working. Amongst others, there were, programs and good programs that were infrastructure that made this country to be resilient. IPEP was introduced. That is the plan, the industrial plan action, and the others that were actually dealt with at the time is the very coherent infrastructure project, which, by the way, just before the minister the previous Minister of Finance left government, which was in his budget speech, he announced 50 billion rand still of that amount of money that's been spent on our infrastructure. And over MTAF, 3 trillion rand. And that is money that was ensured under this administration by President Zuma, that the nation gets focused to develop itself along the lines of infrastructure. What did that infrastructure do? It actually led us to be resilient and not to get to a point where we're shaky like all other nations that were shaky at the time, meaning that there was no panic in him. There was a quiet focus that said, let's do this. And he's actually, I found him all the time being very focused. For the first time, this nation has got children, young students who have been taken through education. NASFAS, over 20 billion rand. It's not small, from about a few million, 200 million or so.
And so the NDP has really worked.
The NDP has actually worked, and it continues to work.
But why is it, Minister, that the president is not, respected for that, or is not honored for the plans of the 9-point plan, the NDP, or even now economic transformation? Why is it that some still call for him to step down, even with his ministers saying the NDP has worked or the NDP is working?
Sifiso, I think there are different reasons and advanced by different people from different corners. There is a voice, this one is a noise, that I hear and that we hear here that says, we want to actually ensure that this ANC government is no longer there. It's history.
Minister, I understand the issue of regime change, but often it also sounds to me like there's still a lot of noise from people who were in the Mbeki camp, who were unhappy with President Zuma taking over. And for that matter, the factions in the ANC today are perpetuated by the Mbeki camp versus the Zuma camp. Because it's not just people outside of the ANC who are fighting the ANC government. It seems like the ANC is eating itself from within.
Look, I wanted to exactly follow that trend and deliberately started outside. And outside, I mean from the other parties outside government. And when they follow through that, obviously they have to, at times, these are tactics that people always use, come inside and try and see who you can find inside to actually either give information or work with you from internal. And here I think we can say is people from Mbeki time who are not satisfied, but let's also become realistic. There are those who change, who were even great supporters of the Zuma administration and Zuma as a leader himself, who also change and go to the other side. So people apply different tactics. They draw different people at any given time. It's either that you may find that there are others who were actually part of Mbeki supporters at the time who are now very, very big supporters of President Zuma. So the tactics change and the people change and the faces change. The reality of the matter is that what's common in that is that, yes, there are those who are saying, as an individual, we don't like this face of this president. And because of that, we don't like the face of this president. They even now blur the lines between the good things that this president does in his administration as well as in the organization. I don't think that's fair. I think we must judge a person from your own performance and not from you know, listening to noises and voices, and then say, on the basis of this, we think that you have not done anything. Look at Pretoria. Look at Johannesburg. There used to be a very big bush here, I'm saying. When I was growing up, and some of you were even born, who are out there younger than me, there was a big bush between Johannesburg and Pretoria. 2008, we didn't have these big roads of 4 lanes at the time. In 2008, thereabout, during Great Depression and recession in the world, here they are in South Africa. They've been constructed. People in deep rural areas, Sikukune, they know what I'm talking about. In deeper rural areas of Polokwane, you see mansions there when you drive there today. In Umtata, along that whole road, there used to be ronda and things like that. The people, because they have now moved to have electricity, from 82% at the time, when about 2 years, in 2003, now we're sitting at 85%, 85.4% of this nation having been electrified. We're not talking about electrifying Johannesburg. This electrification happened in deep rural areas, and thus boosted the economic development and socio-economic development in those deep rural areas. I'm talking from about the time when President Zuma took over. Over 90% of our people now have water, with a functional water system of 78% under this administration. People don't know that, and we forget easily.
But why is it then, Minister, that it seems that the president is sabotaged? Is he sabotaged from within his own cabinet?
I wouldn't put that past anything. Highly possible, because why are these facts that are so glaringly evident not being seen? Highly possible. And why is it that he's being sabotaged as a human being? Sabotage him and therefore deal with the ANC. That's what I think we must actually get to. You want to destroy this party, you go for the head. And this is exactly what's happening. And unfortunately, if me, internal, I also agree to be part of that and have this narrow look at things, it's very unfortunate. Because
we're in the month of May, and you know that May Day, May the 1st, has always been a national event to which the president spoke. But in 2017, the president did not speak at the May Day rally event. COSATU and SACP had been calling for the president to step down. Do you think there is a malicious hand in attempting to divide the alliance?
I am very certain something very big is wrong there. I mean, I am one of the founding members of COSATU. I don't know this COSATU. That I could never ever imagine that a COSATU would say at a rally, president of the ANC, the leader of alliance, doesn't speak. By the way, let me also put it this way. It's not President Zuma who's not being allowed to speak. It's the ANC that's not being allowed to speak, because he has been sent there by the African National Congress. What does this say? And I'm glad that many of our leaders have actually, from the SACP, from COSATU themselves, have actually pronounced, especially the leaders in Free State, that this is so wrong and they regret what has happened. However, I think we need to go back to the drawing board, because something big is happening. That's very wrong.
But who orchestrated this? I mean, the state president doesn't speak at a national event. This is the alliance. You and I attended the January 8 event. Yeah. They spoke about the unity.
That's
Mr. Bladen Zimande spoke before the president and, you know, set his allegiance and said, this is the year of unity, the year of Oliver Tambo. What has happened to that unity when it is the alliance that seems to be breaking the ANC?
So me and you must come back, and the whole nation, and talk about real stuff that is about May Day, real stuff that is about what this administration must deliver. Because if we do that, people will not be overwhelmed. People get overwhelmed because every day, through the media circles, through the, you know, whether it's social media, is whatever, information is being pumped in people's ears that don't trust this leadership, don't trust the president, don't trust the ANC. And I think this is actually what happens. That's going back to the drawing board is exactly to find out who's orchestrating this and for what reasons, to gain what. If indeed this person is external, using us internal, we must actually go to the drawing board. The meeting you're talking about of preaching unity came as a result of the drawing board meeting that we've gone to. and reminded ourselves that indeed we need to work harder, we need to be united if we want this ANC and the whole entire alliance to move forward and to lead this country. We have a long way to go. Our people are still suffering. That remaining 13%, that remaining 15% on any other thing, and the last part of the hill, of climbing the hill, is always the most difficult.
And it's not just within the alliance that we see perhaps the president being targeted. In Parliament, some time back, the president actually called for expropriation of land and said, let it be done without compensation. Mr. Julius Malema said he'd give 6% in order for the ANC to have the ability to amend the constitution so that the expropriation of land can finally come to South Africa. But ANC members in Parliament rejected that call. Wasn't that the opportunity to finally take back the land?
What was behind that? What was behind that call by a leader of another political party? I guess this is what people actually looked at. What is behind that? Do we have to do it this way or the other way around? Led by another somebody. It's not as if the ANC doesn't want land back to the people. That's why under this administration, by the way, this President Zuma's administration is the one that started emphasizing transformation measures more acutely than any other, by the way, including this land. I haven't gone to any meeting where the president doesn't actually almost get to give us a lecture on land that must come to the people. And actually even talking about personal experiences of himself and of other people. So there's no doubt, I'm trying to say, getting to that point, there's no doubt that indeed the ANC under this administration and even the coming into administration want people to get their land back. But
it seems like there are some ministers, though, who don't believe in land expropriation.
It can't work,
and some ministers who don't believe in radical economic transformation.
It can't work, unfortunately. We have no individualism. This is why I was emphasizing right from the beginning the collectivism of an administration. If me come from my own home, having slept this way, dreamt of something else, no land to the people and so forth, it can't be that. That doesn't make it the ANC policy. We will implement ANC policy, and we shall do it. That says land to the people. Radical economic transformation, which in the financial terms now I'm going to have, they call it inclusive economy. By the way, let me say that when we were negotiating worldwide on some of these agreements that we have attained, including a climate change agreement at COP21, I've always been surprised why to these people of the world, the haves, do not want to even hear the word inclusive. They understood that when you say inclusive, you're meaning that let's transform it and bring the people in. Whether you call it inclusive, whether you call it radical transformation, it's the same thing. The issue is that the wealth of the people must be shared amongst the people, and the people, we're talking about the rural economy, the blacks, people in this country, it has to happen.
And for that reason, many people who side with President Zuma or who believe in radical economic transformation get the wrong side of the newspapers. They are shamed upon by many publications. You know, they seem to be on the bad side of public relations in this country. Don't you run the risk, Minister, of then being sabotaged yourself because you believe in radical economic transformation, or you are viewed as a Zuma minister or a pro-Zuma minister?
I still have to be told what a pro-Zuma minister means and a minister means. I will support President Zuma through thick and thin under this administration for the simple reason that I do know that we are supporting a principle. We are supporting a leader.
You had ministers like Mr. Derek Hanekom, who kept his position as a minister, but called for President Zuma to resign. You've got the Minister of Higher Education, Mr. Blaine Zimande, who is still the Secretary General of the SACP and still Minister of Higher Education. He does not resign, but he'll call for President Zuma to resign. Those are anti-Zuma ministers. And the ministers who say they will stand with President Zuma through thick and thin are called pro-Zuma ministers, and there's an opposition against those ministers. Are you not running the risk then, Minister, of being opposed and being shamed?
There are young people who have been taught politics the right way, who will always stay with the principle, who will ensure that the movement, policies of a movement are implemented. I'm one of them. I'm not young. I've been taught throughout, and many of us, by the way, I'm not even talking about myself alone, many of us who have been over 40 years in this movement and actually ensured that we learn. And in those lessons, in that process, what we learned as lessons is that you have to ensure that you stay within the principles, you practice and implement that which is party policy. And whatever happens, running risk or no risk, as long as we stay within policy and principle of this movement and ensure that we move together with the rest of the organization, not with individuals, by the way, we will never, ever go wrong. I mean, I've come from very difficult times at times, but staying on principle actually helps. And it actually make you continue to work.
I don't think that the SACP and COSATU, being alliance partners, should dictate to the ANC that they should remove the president and whom they should appoint, because they are alliance partner, but the main party is the ANC. Do you still need a COSATU, and do you still need an SACP as alliance partners? As you say, you are one of the founders of COSATU, but does the ANC still need them to function today?
We must remember that there are individuals and there are organizations. If by any chance some people, maybe a few in the organization, in the alliance, do think that perhaps it's time that they should call it off. You remember, this is not the first time. The Connie September investigation that happened quite a long time ago, when I think, if I'm not wrong, Chris Dlamini was still alive. At that time, there was a discussion about whether to move out of the alliance or not. The resolution was that, no, let's stay within the alliance. Because of certain individuals, we can't therefore easily conclude, and I'm saying easily, emphasizing easily, conclude that the alliance must be disbanded. It is a fact that there might be some misunderstanding somewhere, some probably a bit of lack of understanding on some of the things, some being overwhelmed by this media which says, hey, this president is so wrong, has done this and that and that and that. They must retreat a bit and remind themselves about these facts.
But is that not a trend then? Is that not a trend then? You remember what happened before President Mbeki was recalled, and the same garnering and the same meetings were happening then. There seemed to be, in the last month, the same mood or same atmosphere as that to which before President Mbeki was recalled. Is this not a trend that Mr. Nzimande would come in and, you know, the alliances would want to pull away, there'd be reaction from the markets, and the NEC would decide to recall its president? Is this not a continuing trend that every 5 or 10 years the ANC has got to go through this? Why don't you react, Minister, and whip out the sellouts from your movement, as you continue to say?
It is actually scary, quite scary indeed. This individualism, quite scary. I don't think that it is a trend already, but it is becoming a trend. And it could end up being a norm, or even a practice, or sounding like a practice. I think it's quite scary. There shouldn't be, in a movement like ours, time when it's towards the end of the term that we now want to open revolving doors and then say, me, myself, and I think I'm suitable to be there. There are ways of doing this. We have done it before. Even in this very same COSATU, by the way, we used to converge and say, we think that, Sifiso, you are a good leader. And some come and say, no, we don't think Sifiso is a good leader. We even talked to Sifiso in his or her eyes to say that we don't think that you will lead us for this reason and that reason, maybe not even in this position, but in that position. So there's been those discussions. This discussion must be held internal, inside, and not stand there and say, me, myself, and I am going there. I don't know where this thing comes from. We all don't know. We are actually surprised. Weeding out people. Yes, naturally, the ANC is very, very good at doing that, by the way. You set yourself up and put yourself against the movement. you end up nowhere. That does happen. It's natural, as natural can be.
Thank you for speaking to me, Minister, and this completes part one of our talk. That was Ms. Edna Molewa, Minister of Environmental Affairs and NEC member of the ANC. This completes part one of my interview with her, but stay tuned to ANN7 for part two of this interview. Thank you and goodbye for now.